Okay, everybody, hello and welcome to Astrospeak. This is a chat show formatted for featuring astrologers arguing, cooperating, agreeing and disagreeing, inspiring each other and sharing their knowledge. Remember, play nice, no bloodshedding, okay? We will be asking questions and asking for feedback and opinions, but please remember to keep it short, to the point, and succinct. We wish to have a lively and active show, and all of these questions that we're going to ask involve things that I'm pretty sure every one of us has experienced at some point along the way. My name is Anthony S. Picco. I'm an astrologer from New York City, and my co-host from the UK is Michaela Villers-Kendall, also a fine astrologer. And we have as the assistants, Linda Johnson is running the meeting, and Sue is the timekeeper, Sue Hillyard. Reluctantly so, but she's going to be the timekeeper. So we're just going to launch into the first question. And the first question I'm going to pick was, do you give free advice online? Why or why not? So my quick answer is, it depends. Is it a small question like what's my best career for me or something like that? I don't mind sharing the information. Or, what is Mars and Gemini like? I'll give a tidbit out online. If somebody says, tell me all about myself, here's my chart, bye-bye. Okay, this is what I get paid for. So I'm not going to give you a full free reading. Now, as one other thing I will mention, if a person is in crisis and pleads poverty, but really wants help, I'm willing to consider bartering or doing some exchange of some kind. But we all have to keep in mind, we're astrologers. If you claim you're in crisis and then you give me a chart, I can tell if you're actually in crisis or not. So we'll see if you're going to get away with that one. So that's the way I look at it. I'm willing to be free. I'm a little bit of a socialist at heart anyway. But Michaela, do you have any opinions on free advice?
Yeah, I do give free advice, but obviously I put a limit on it because you can't go on forever. But then at a certain point, I do ask someone if they'd like their chart done and go deeper into it. So that's how I do it. It only promotes the business too, and I do residential courses as well. So I teach and do residential courses. So everything promotes it, and I find that works pretty well. Yeah.
I will say it also depends on the mood I'm in. If it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm tired, you're not getting anything out of me. But if I'm up for it, I will.
That's different. Not a Samaritan.
Yeah, right. Anybody else? How do you feel about offering free advice? Where do you draw the line? What do you feel about it? Daniel, were you next?
I guess I'm next. I think like all you guys, I give a lot away. But I draw the line with free readings. If somebody asks me what does a skip step mean, I'll probably answer them if it's a general EA question. But if it's about their chart, I'm reluctant to do it because once you do it for one person, it kind of takes on a life of its own. In all the years that I'm on Facebook, doing this stuff, I did it once. I did it once actually this year. For a woman overseas who had just lost her dog. She was just totally distraught, and I know how she felt. I mean, we've put down 5 dogs in the past 10 years, so it was close to my heart. So I was willing to go in there and help her out, but I'm very reluctant to do it because I don't think that. I think that first of all, there's a metaphysical principle that there needs to be a payment exchange. I think that's number one. There has to be some kind of even exchange. And I agree with Anthony. If somebody wanted to barter, if they didn't have the funds, I work with everybody. I never turn anybody away because they can't pay a full fee or whatever. But I draw the line at free.
Yeah, it's something about the word free. People don't take it. It doesn't have any value. It's free, so why would they take it seriously? No, I understand exactly. Ryan, you're next up here.
Hey, thanks for picking my hand there. Yeah, we have to, as astrologers, we have to be really careful because when we look at somebody's chart, you got a gateway into their soul. So having, a little free advice here or there, can be somewhat dangerous because if we maybe don't know everything that's going on in their chart and they just say, oh, well, Uranus is opposing my Mars, tell me about that. We're not taking into account anything else in their chart that might help to contextualize that. So little quippy one-liners in my book are fine, but again, we have to be careful about opening a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I always start with, given the limited information you've told me, you know, like Uranus opposite Mars, and then I'll say, but there's much more going on, so this is just a starting point. You're right, it is like, what if they've got Pluto squaring Mars and they want to know about Uranus opposite their Mars? It's a whole nother ball game. Anybody else? Amanda, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I love that you're bringing in the importance of context and container. And one of the things you'll probably hear me say a lot is it all depends on everything. But I can't think of a time when I've been just approached for free advice. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So like generally speaking, I'm willing to talk about a little bit and then say, you know, the rest of this falls in the context of a bigger section or bigger session. But one of the areas that I do kind of, I guess, issue free advice is when it comes to students. So students at any of the institutions that I teach with, it's actually really important to me that they email me with questions that they have. And that usually is just about, you know, technical aspects of the chart or whatever. And then I'll refer them to a longer session if it needs that container. Or if I see somebody posting something like their chart in a forum and they're obviously asking for help there and something occurs to me, then I'll kind of jump in as I feel like I want to.
Yeah, if a student's question, I don't mind answering because they're looking for information like, well, what does Mars and Capricorn mean? But if they want to know about the chart, it's a different ballgame. You're right. You're right. Michaela, do you want to bring up your next question?
My question is, how did you first find astrology? How was it introduced to you, and what took off for you? What led to a career?
Do you want to start with it, Michaela, or?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So for me, when I was a kid, Patrick Walker in England was a big astrologer. He was a sun sign astrologer, but he was a very good one. And he did this wonderful magazine spreads on a Sunday, and I used to collect them, and I kept them for years. And that was my first introduction. Then Linda Goodman came next when I was in America. She was wonderful too. Another sun sign astrologer, basically, though. It wasn't until a few years later when I was at drama school that I came across Carl Jung's Memories, Reflections and Dreams. And that got me onto Liz Green, funnily enough. So Jungian astrology was my first way in, but then it led to I went to the Faculty of Astrological Studies, and then so it was a progression to traditional astrology, psychological astrology, and of evolutionary astrology and esoteric astrology. So one thing led to another. That was the path for me. So I wondered who wants to go next.
Well, real quick for myself, I'd already been kind of the spiritual. What?
Yeah, you first.
Yeah, I had been a spiritual student all along. Seth Material, Silva Mind Control, Alan Watts, and I just thought astrology sounded like a bag of garbage to me. And my girlfriend at the time had her chart read, and she said, "Well, I don't know, it seemed kind of accurate." I said, "All right, I'll check it out." I was going to be open-minded. Well, keep in mind, I'm a Capricorn. I was so freaked out and paranoid by the time she was done. I want to know how long she'd been tapping my phone, how she got her hands on my diaries. And what happened was I looked at that piece of paper and I said, I got to figure this out. And I just started grabbing books. And suddenly, 3 years later, I was an astrologer. I don't know what happened, but here I am 35 years later. Daniel, you got something to say?
Always. I was, I guess, 17 or 18 years old. It was the mid 70s, and all this stuff was in the field, but I really hadn't touched much of it. And I walked into a bookstore one day, and there was this big coffee table book with, I guess it was a medieval drawing of a lion right on the cover. I didn't know it at the time. I have 3 planets in Leo, but I didn't know that then. And I was just drawn to it. I mean, I saw the line and I picked it up and I brought it back. And it really started my interest. And it actually generated my first marriage, because the woman who I married a few years later saw that book, and it started up a conversation, and we were together for 25 years. So yeah, It's got a life of its own.
So we got Michael Pinchera. How did astrology drag you down to the morass?
The morass, yeah. Well, let's see. It was my 24th year. I was just reading everything possible in the spiritual realm. And the first thing that I picked up was Rudyard, and I just devoured his books. And I don't know, whatever other astrology books I could find, I was reading. I was also into, I read all of Alice Bailey's books, her work on astrology. But I was really working or feeling more connected with holistic astrology, through Rudyard, Carl Jung, people like that. And anyway,
Right. Yeah.
it just felt right.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is a kind of fate that you feel like you're sort of led there. That's how I felt about it. It seems you avoid it. You can't avoid it. It keeps popping up until it grabs you. Yeah.
It was my Saturn return that dragged me in. It was right at my Saturn return. I was dragged in by it,
Actually,
So-
it was for me too. Yeah.
Mm.
That's odd.
So
Yeah. Okay, so Amanda, I think, wanted to say something. Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, so I grew up, I was born in 1980, and so like cheesy 80s culture is very much a part of who I am. And I like to go to the mall a lot. And I saw a poster in a place called Claire's Boutique when I was, 11 or 12, that had 3 paragraphs about Aquarius. And it was the first time in my Aquarian Sun, Aquarian South Node life where I felt seen. I had never really fit in before. And so I bought the poster and I kept it. And that kind of led into a little romance with tarot. And then in my 20s, I stumbled across Carl Jung at the same time as I read Cosmos and Psyche. And I was like, you can study historical cycles with this stuff. And then my Saturn return hit and I was also dragged in.
it was all over. Okay.
It's all over.
Nora, you had something to say, Nora Raquel? Or Rachel, excuse me if I don't pronounce it
Yeah,
right.
that's okay. Nora, Rochelle. So for me, it was my, I guess, Saturn opposition. I was like 14 or 15, but it was, also that mindset of kind of the young rebellious teen. I was actually came from a pretty standard status quo, maybe even the Christian idea, astrology is bad. And this part of me was like, I wanna see it. What is it? And so, of course, the Aquarius moon in me, plus the sun and Mercury conjunct Uranus, I was like, yeah, this is where I belong. And I think the first time I was exactly like what you said, Amanda, I was like, I feel so seen. I was also given the wrong birth time by my mom. And it changed my moon. So at first I kind of entered it from a really skeptical place, Virgo South Node, where I was trying to disprove it almost, and kind of vacillating back and forth. I'm like, is it as bad as they say it is, or is it actually this extremely beautiful healing tool for self-awareness? And so it was kind of this vacillation until I found my correct birth time, and then it shifted everything. And I was immediately a believer, but it definitely stemmed from that place of wanting to explore what's in the blacklist books, why was it banned, or what is so bad about it? Because I think also there's this inherently passionate part of me that wants to kind of love and accept everything. So I was like, well, if there's this thing that people saying is bad and I shouldn't look at it, then I definitely want to look at it more. But kind of from that space of find the good in it. And of course I found so much more. So
if we want you to do something here, we just forbid you and you'll do it, right? Is that what it comes down to?
That's what my mom always used to say. She's like, I need to reverse psychology you. I'm just going to tell you I don't like something and then maybe you'll like it.
Okay,
Are you Scorpio, Amanda?
What was that?
Are you a Scorpio?
I'm a Sagittarius sun, but it is in the 8th house. So.
Okay. All right, Mr. Bartlett, you got something to say about how you discovered astrology?
Yeah, so my background was I've always been really into spirituality ever since I was born, and just connected with things. And I had my first reading when I was at UC Santa Cruz in college, and when I was 18, and then really didn't touch back on it again until I moved to Santa Fe in 1999, and just all the ways in which my life had previously worked weren't working. And so couldn't figure out what was going on with it. Had gotten out of college, had done my psych degree. So I went and saw an astrologer, Tom Brady, here in town, not the football player. And he said, oh, well, you have Pluto and Chiron on your ascendant. And, you know, he explained these 4 transits that were going on. I thought, oh my God, you know, what a great system this could be. Instead of like trying to give people a pill or tell them how wrong they are, if we could just incorporate cycles of people's lives and understanding of that for everyone, what a huge difference we can make. What a level of acceptance there could be. What a difference in the way we frame ourselves. You know, just like what Nura was saying, you know, like looking at the differences, like just like with our moon, you know, the other thing was finding out I have a Scorpio moon, you know, men in my generation having that level of feeling, 29 degrees in the 12th house.
Wow.
You know, what else is going to explain it? For us freaks here, you know, Aquarian sun too, you know, you know, we're here. I really feel, you know, one of the things is just like what each of our journeys are of the self-discoveries, you know, how do we help other people find their superpowers, their mutant X-Men abilities? Because the truth is we're all these gorgeous archetypal representations. And how do we get us all to acknowledge that and make room for each other? That's our dilemma.
You know, wasn't there a book in the 70s called Passages, which was specifically about cycles of life that we all go through? It wasn't astrological. Gail Shee, one self-help group of some kind in the 70s. So the concept's out there. I wish more people would grasp that, like we have cycles, you know. Last one on this.
Pathologizing who we are at different stages in our lives.
Right. You know, it's a good excuse. Sorry, it's my Saturn return. Get out of my way.
Next.
The
last one we have for this particular question is, Nia, how you got into astrology, wherever you are in the crossboard here. Nia, okay.
Yeah, I remember it very clearly. It was May 1999, and it was in a spiritual convention in Montreal, Canada. I was there to study actually trance mediumship. But since this was a convention bringing all esoteric sciences together, very renowned astrologer named Noel Thiel came to lecture, and he was giving a special rate for the conference. And of course, I grabbed it and I went over. And to this day, I remember the words he spoke when I went in the room. Like, this reading literally blew my cap off. And by the end of it, I asked him, okay, Noel, you've interested me. How can I learn this myself? And with his Leo baritone voice, he took out a piece of paper and a pencil, no smartphones then. And he said, this is the phone number of a friend of mine, Maurice Fernandez. He's going to be your astrology teacher and good friend. And, you know, 20 years later, to this day, Maurice is my astrology teacher and good friend. More than 20 years, yeah.
Okay, moving on. I get the next question, and this is a little simpler. How many charts do you use during a typical reading, and what are they? And I'm just going to say, for me, I'm kind of simplistic. I go natal, transits, secondary progressions. If I have to, I'll go into solar arc and solar returns. But natal and transits primary, and then secondary progressions are my 3 charts that I usually use per client. Michaela?
Yeah, I'm the same really, although I do use the solar chart as well as the natal chart. I find that gives a really good perspective from the sun point of view. And also if the time isn't quite sure, it helps a lot. Yeah, so that's what I do. Yeah, same thing.
Anyone else have any opinion on how many charts they like to use? I just see Daniel's listed. Daniel, wherever you are, come on, join in. No, you're muted. Okay, you go.
Yep, got to unmute. Okay. So I agree with you, Anthony. I basically use 3 charts when somebody comes for a first reading. But when they come back again, you know, if it's a second or third time, somebody I know over time, what I like to look at are the Saturn and Uranus cycles. I find that it's very revealing, and it tells people, you know, I probably like you know, I often hear somebody say to me, well, nobody's ever told me that before. But when you tell them about their Uranus cycle, or how Saturn is interwoven into that Uranus cycle, you get that same kind of response. You're showing them something that you know, a basic natal interpretation is not going to reveal.
Mm.
Like, good
But-
point. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a tricky point because you don't know, you don't know where they are when you first meet them. Like, have they evolved, or they're a 60-year-old teenager, or are they a really mature 22-year-old? So how you interpret the chart would definitely depend upon that. Next
Well,
up,
I ask everybody a question, and that kind of, I can kind of put them into the range of where they are across an evolutionary scale. Is this somebody who's I rarely get anybody who's consensus, but you get somebody who's individuating and or spiritualizing. Yeah, that's where our clientele is coming from. But you don't know, the invisible dimension to the chart. It's consciousness brought to it, and the chart doesn't tell you that. You've got to kind of know that ahead of time. So I always get context, and I always ask a question.
okay, Nia, you wanted to add to how many charts you use?
First, I have to ask Daniel, is it a specific question you asked them? Because if it is, please share it. It would be helpful for all of us,
I
That's
ask
a
them if
dilemma I have, like how do you delicately, sensitively assess, where they are coming from? How do you listen to the fruits and not the words, to the deeds, not to the concepts?
I ask them if they have a question. I let them pose the question, and the question will tell me right away where they're at.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Michael was going to answer a question.
Well, Michael, Nia, I think Nia was ahead. Michael, we will get you, we promise. Nia, you wanted to talk about how many charts?
Like when a client first comes in, it's basically transits, natal and transits. If I have to use secondary progressions or solar arc or solar return, I will. But I find that so many astrologers don't really dive into the transits that are so rich, it's like a never-ending mine. And go to all these techniques, some of them ancient, some of them esoteric, so without really diving into that primary tool in which you could gain so much from. And I also look at coming eclipses for the next year or so.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's very useful. Yeah, and also it's good not to have a set formula sometimes, isn't it? It's just to play it by ear,
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I'll look at the secondary progressions, but if nothing's happening in the secondary progression chart, I basically stick with the natal and transits. Michael, give it a shot. What do you got to say?
Yeah, I do the natal transits and the progressions, but then the other thing I do is I do the 90-degree dial to kind of see, make sure that I'm picking up on things and kind of what's coming up on the horizon. And of course, along with the progressions is really key is entering and exiting signs.
Yeah, no, to me, the progressions, if somebody's at 0 degrees of a new sign, it's like, boom, there you go. Yeah. Or making an exact, and I mean exact aspect to a natal thing. If it's exactly 12 degrees on your sun, then it matters. But other than that, I'm not that into it. Michaela, next question.
Yeah, great. Okay, so best astrology book ever. It's hard, I know, but just to pick one.
Do you have one?
For me, I was gonna. For me, it's pretty easy. I mean, there's so much, and obviously, but for a complete astrology book, Alan Oken's Complete Astrology: The Classic Guide to Modern Astrology is wonderful. At first, I was put off Alan Oken's books because I wasn't into esoteric astrology, but that was a big mistake, and I came back to it later and then found it's actually one of the best places to start, and that's a very, very thorough book, so I'd recommend that any day. It's good grounding from the ancient wisdom. Yeah. So who wants to
well, my two favorites are for any beginner, I always recommend Stephen Forrest's The Inner Sky, because what I like about that book is he strips everything down to the core meanings. It's not 800 pages listing every little thing, but he kind of gives you the basics of it all. And just a book that I consider a real right hand to me. I love Robert Pelletier's Planets and Aspects. He's really in depth. I will say his Planets and Houses, I have yet to figure out the book, and I've been reading it for 20 years. But Planets and Aspects is really a remarkable look at aspects and the subtleties that they go through. So those are my two favorite astrology books, although I've got a whole,
Good choice.
all of them, of course.
So Amanda was going to answer. Amanda?
Okay, Amanda and Sarah. Sarah, so Amanda first, go ahead.
Sorry. Was it?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer, but I'll just go with the two that pop into my mind first. Yesterday's Sky by Stephen Forrest, which I think is the first astrology book that I read cover to cover, because it's engaging and accessible and really helpful. And then Understanding Karmic Complexes by Patricia Walsh, because it's also just super engaging, but it gives you the stories to match up with the chart from the EA perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good choice. Yeah, Stephen Forrest, wonderful. And of course, he's an evolutionary astrologist, so, you know.
Sarah, Sarah DeHaven, you're next. What are your favorite books?
Yeah, I'm not sucking up, I swear to God, but it's the EA glossary. Like, it really is. It's a great resource. And I'm very much, I'm the type who, I'm just very esoteric in how I approach astrology. I'm pretty technical. I have a 6th house Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter in the 3rd house. Pretty technical, but at the same time, I just gravitate toward the esoteric approach, the intuitive approach, and I find the EA glossary really goes with the type of astrology I practice. So that one, that's my go-to. I agree with Alan Oken's book, and I know, and this one, I just like the pictures. I'm sorry, but Parker's Astrology, definitely.
That is a great book.
It is a fun book. It's a playful book, which is what I like about it.
Yeah, colorful.
And by the way, it gets redone every 10, 12 years. So the complete new set of artwork is created. I have the one from the hippie days. You should see that one.
Psychedelic, right?
Yeah. Michael, your favorite books?
Well, I mean, the hard part is that really it's about which book do you like in which category is probably more appropriate. But I agree with Michaela. I mean, for like a simple, like Where Everything Is, I love Alan's book. One that I recommend to almost everyone who is interested in astrology is George's book, The Astrology for Yourself. I just think that is like from start to finish, it gives someone a really great understanding. They've got, it's like a journal, it's your own personal thing, and it's like you get to journey it on yourself. So those I'd say are my two. And I'm sorry, Jeff's book on Pluto, those two books on Pluto.
Oh yeah.
I'm not an EA person, but damn.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, we could be listing books here all night long. That's for sure.
Could. Yeah,
you know.
We all have books in our,
So anybody else have any favorite books, or shall we move to the next question? Okay.
Right,
Next question. What is your method in approaching a chart? Where do you start and why? Now, for me, very simply, I'm very visual. I'm already a graphic artist. And I just look at the chart and I look at what's going on. If there's like a whole bunch of planets, like it's like 2 sets of stelliums, I'll notice that. If it's scattered all over the place, I'll notice that. Also, one of the things that always is an alarm to me is if there's like one trine and one square and nothing else is aspecting anything else. It's like, oh dear. So I'm always aware of the pattern that I see in front of me, and then I'll dive deeper into like, well, what's squaring what and what's thing. And I'm always looking for like, you got 8 planets in one house. I think you're going to be a little obsessive, you know. So that's how I initially start, just sort of visual thing. How do you start, Michaela?
Well, I usually start at the Ascendant. I mean, I learned that at the Jesus College, Oxford school, and I've used it ever since. And to start at the Ascendant and any planets around the Ascendant, and then the Ascendant ruler, and any planets that any houses that the planets in the Ascendant and the first house rule, and then work your way very systematically around there. And also, if with the solar chart, start with the sun and then the house that the sun rules, and it does give you a very it builds up a picture, and you don't really miss anything right there, because you see that the picture comes together. It's like making a sketch, and then you fill in the paint. Yeah, so that's how I do it. So who's first?
Sarah, looks like you're next. How do you get into a chart? What's your first steps?
Oh, well, I usually send out an intake form to anyone who works with me. So I find out specifically what it is they're looking for. And then I intuitively follow from there. Sometimes I'll have asteroids that come to mind intuitively to check, and I'll go into that. I know it sounds strange because it makes a lot of sense to do the basics first, but I kind of work at it in a very, almost like putting puzzle pieces together. I'll start off with that, and then I go into the base planets and look at those to get a feel of the chart. So that's usually my approach, but it really depends on what a person's coming to me for. But yeah, asteroids usually first. I'll feel like what asteroid kind of resonates with what they came to me for, go to that, and then look at their Pluto, their sun, their moon, and their ascendant, and their nodes. That's a general rule for me.
Okay. Daniel, you're up next.
Well, I agree with all you guys. I basically like to get just an intuitive sense of the chart, at first, but I also send out an intake form to get as much context as I can. But pretty much work classic Jeffrey Wolf Green. I've looked at many different kinds of astrology over the years, but when I encountered Jeffrey's work, that just kind of nailed it for me. And I use Pluto as the entry point into the chart. And I start to break down the chart, looking at all the aspects to Pluto. And I find that by the time I'm done with Pluto and then look at the lunar nodes, I've got the chart. I see what's going on, especially when I correlate it to what the client has already told me. So that's how I work with it. But I like my sessions really to be client driven. I don't want to sit there for 90 minutes and just have it a monologue and tell them everything I can possibly think of to tell them about their chart. I want to find out from them what it is that they want to take away and what they need to know and modify it. But I still start with Pluto because I have found time and time again that Pluto was the foundation of the chart.
That's where the growth comes from in the evolution. Sure. We're going to move to the next. I just mentioned there's a lot of people want to comment on this, so we'll take this a little longer. Next up would be Sue Hillyard. What do you do when you first look at a chart? How do you dive in?
Well, I agree with just about everybody here, and what I do is I get a sense of the chart. I ask the person what it is they want me to focus on, and then I look at the transits that are going on. That's kind of my first thing, because I learned years ago that a client will come to you when there is something going on in the transit. So the advice was to look for whatever is within 1 degree of one of their planets. And so I look at that and figure it out, and then it's a dialogue. It's usually trying to figure out how it works from there.
Yeah, well, you're right. Usually the transits as well will obviously draw you in, because that's why the clients come, because that's it shows right there that will draw you in. Yeah.
I always figure it's Saturn, Uranus, or Pluto. That's why they're here. They don't come to you with Jupiter or Neptune. Actually, they may not even be able to find you if Neptune's a heavy transit. But they usually come crying to an astrologer when it's Pluto or Saturn or Uranus.
Or Chiron as well.
Well, yes, Chiron too, you're right. Next up, we have Amanda. So what do you got to say about how you dive into a chart, Amanda?
Yeah, so very similar to everyone else. I also have folks fill out an intake form just with basics about what they're looking for, what they're wanting from the session. But I start by making a header on a piece of paper that has their birth info and name, and then I'll write out their sun, moon, and rising. And then I just stare at the chart and see what I'm drawn to, how I feel when I'm looking at it. And I take that information along with whatever they're bringing to the session and use it to dive into Pluto and the nodes first. Oftentimes Pluto in the nodes and transits takes up the whole session, but I'm usually centering it around their questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you get the nodes and it just goes on and on, doesn't it? I mean, everything does spring spiritually from Pluto and the nodes, as you're saying. Yeah.
So Ryan, let it rip. What do you got to say?
Yeah, real quickly, I'll pull somebody's chart and I'll look at it for about 7 or 8 seconds. And then I'll go for a walk, or I'll go lie down, or I'll go play in the garden and get out of my conscious mind, and as a Neptunian, open up to information beyond me, that if something wants to come and download and tell me what is best to look at and how to approach it, I'll run with that.
Yeah,
It's funny, I do kind of the reverse there, because I'll do all the prep work and the notes and stuff. And then if I have a client at 8 o'clock, at 7:30, I'll take in for about 15 minutes, figuring that this get anything intuitive in here after I've done the literal work.
There we go then, yeah.
So Nia, you would like to tell us how you get into charts.
So yeah, I have this very, organized approach. I always start from the south node, and I talk about the south node and the north node and anything connected or in an angle to it, and basically spreading out the evolutionary story of the soul. And somehow you would think that to the client, the most powerful part of the reading would be, I don't know, maybe talking about current transits or something like that. But it's always that part about the nodes that feels most relevant to the client and has the most impact on the client in the long run. And that they say that they enjoy the most. And then I just zoom in, and I talk more about the transits. But I do south node, north node, luminaries, ascendant, and then first to 12th house. That's my routine.
Great. Okay, so go on to the next question.
Michaela, let her rip.
Yeah. Okay, so readings from well-known astrologers, because we've all been to, we should have been to them if we haven't. And so the best and the worst, no names, obviously, but the best, what you got was, there's really a good learning experience from, and also the worst experience that taught you something as well. For me, the best, I mean, I could say there's several astrologers that I learned a lot from, but what the main thing I think I learned from them was to hone in on, to nutshell what is the main purpose of the chart, and also the dilemma at the moment, where is a person on their path, and to really hone on those two things, not try to put, like you said, Anthony, not put every single thing in there, because that's not what people want to hear anyway, and it confuses everything, but just to really hone in, where are they on their path, and what can you say that is will really help them on that. The worst, just to say that, there was one astrologer who was very monetarily, too monetary. I mean, I agree, astrologers should be concerned with money. That we make a big mistake like that. We undervalue our services. But there was this one astrologer who, he had a seminar going, and he was a very good astrologer, but he saw like 6 clients before the seminar started in half-hour slots at £100 a slot. And I signed up for one of these. Well, I was sort of dubious about what could you learn in half an hour. But what really got me about it was he honed in, like I was saying, the good astrologers were honing in on something that could help you. He honed in on one of your most sensitive areas of your chart. And as you had only half an hour, you thought, I don't really want to answer. He asked you questions about it, and I don't want to go there, because you thought this is not, good psychotherapeutic practice to open up something, a can of worms. I was quite angry by the time the session ended, and I was thinking of asking for my money back. In fact, several people were very angry. So that's my worst experience.
Okay, the question, just to repeat it briefly, is like, what was your best experience with another astrologer and what was your worst? I make a point every couple of years of contacting an astrologer I don't know online and saying, let's trade charts, particularly because I just, the eye can't see itself, and it helps to have somebody bounce back you. So, and I've learned something from every one of them, and you understand everybody's got their own point of view. What I actually get the most from, believe it or not, are the clients, because they'll come in and I'll say, oh, well, you have this aspect. It can mean this, this, and this. And then they go, I've done this with it. And you're like, hadn't even occurred to me. Yeah, that would be, that square that would make. So that's where I actually get more out of everything, is actually the one out of every 3 or 4 readings is a new little tidbit that pops up, and I've been doing this 35 years, and still another tidbit pops up. So that's my way of doing it.
Don't you? Everyone and everything. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Ryan, best and worst astrologer experience, no names. Okay.
No names.
So imagine you have studied astrology for 6 or 7 years, you're 24 years old, and you're still, opening up to the magic and wonders of the universe. And you go to a famous big time astrologer, and you're at a party, and you're like, hey, can you look at my chart? And that famous big time astrologer looks at your chart, and you're 24 years old. And the astrologer looks at it and says, your 50s are going to be wonderful. So I'm 40.
You shouldn't ask.
Okay. So
you got 10 years to go.
2 more years until, everything's great.
Any advice?
So we have to be very careful with our wording as astrologers, because you don't want to tell a 24-year-old, hey, in 26 years your life is going to be great, because then you spend 26 years going. My best. You have
done that, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is I did that to myself, because when I first started studying astrology, I noticed that in 35 years Pluto was going to be in my sun. And so I okay, I got to be ready for that. But other stuff happened. Yeah.
Don't head too far.
my best astrology readings actually, honestly, from my level 4 students who I have introduced a few techniques to, and the stuff that they came out of them, about my own chart. I was like, oh, whoa, who's teaching who here? So, so that'd be really powerful when, your students can really amaze you with the gifts that they have.
Absolutely. That's some of the reasons my students have given me, like, wow, I never would have thought of that, but they aren't as programmed as we are at that point. They're still kind of fresh, and they're willing to think of thoughts they never thought before. Daniel, you're up next. If anybody else wants to, Mikkel, are you going to say something? No?
No,
Okay.
I was just saying, also the chart that you get, it's showing, the client brings you, it's showing something about your chart too. It's like you are learning something that you should know at the moment. It's all in the moment. Yeah. So, yeah, Daniel?
Okay, so I guess I have to kind of introduce a third quotient here. The first reading I ever had was from an astrology teacher back in the 70s. It was my first astrology class. And I have to admit that it opened me up when she said, Mars has this certain energy. I really got it. It resonated with me. I didn't know what the energy was, but I understood what she was saying. But the whole thing was really about memorizing, and it was very, very formulaic, and I got turned off to it. The I Ching and Yogananda and Tarot and those things became my best friends for the next 25 years. But then years later, and it was only about 15 years ago, I had a reading. I've had 2 readings from 2 well-known EA astrologers, and I'm definitely not going to mention any names. And the first one read for me, and all of a sudden I was back into astrology. That reading alone brought me back in, because she told me things about myself that nobody had ever said. I think I've said that before. But she also explained things about astrology that nobody had ever explained to me before. And I had 2 readings with her, and it really pushed me on my way, to eventually be sitting here talking about, as a professional astrologer. I had another reading from another well-known EA person, and when it was over, I said, "Really?" I mean, I was appalled. I mean, what I came away with, is that they told me, you have 3 planets in Leo, you've got a big heart, and I said, "Really?" I mean, I was appalled. I was totally blown away. And so I had no expectation for that at all. It's somebody whose work I respect. I think she does a lot of good things for the, for what we do, but I wouldn't go to her for a reading.
It can go like that sometimes, can't it? It can be disappointing. But as we say, you learn something from everything, even though it's negative.
Even if it's not to do that.
Right.
Anyone
No,
else?
I had an awful reading very early on. I was studying. I was beginning to do readings, and I had this student who I basically told her, do not go anywhere near astrology from now on, because she was the doom and gloom type. Oh, you've got Saturn in your first house. There's no point to your life. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? And I found a lot of the people that are just beginning to study it, and I will say a lot of students online can be, I'm Scorpio rising. That's dark. What is the meaning of my life? It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of reading that always makes me nuts. You've got to give people hope. As somebody said tonight, it's all about empowering your client, giving them back what they don't think they have,
Exactly.
So,
the doom and doom thing is, and it's a shame, because it makes a lot of people afraid also to go to an astrology, which is a big shame. It needs changing, this attitude.
Yeah, I always try to say there's no good or bad charts, but some of them are a little more work than others. That's all.
Yeah.
That's
for sure.
Yeah. So
so are we in the next question?
The next question is, how much astrological detail do you include in the reading? In other words, like, how much astrology do you give them? And my comment is that when I first go through the chart, I'll ID the planets and loosely, Mars is about how you take action. Saturn is how you hold yourself back. And then I'll just basically speak the tendencies, not the planets as much. But I will say, when you see one planet utterly dominate the chart, like maybe there's 7 different aspects to Saturn, or maybe Neptune really controls their chart, I'll spend a little more time on that planet because I'm going to keep coming back to the themes of it.
Sure.
So, that's where I will actually explain a little more about astrology, just so they can follow along. At least that's my take on how I do it. Ryan, you're next here.
Yeah, I want to take a look at their ascendant and their ascendant ruler. Do I, are they a Leo or a Sag rising? Do I like the song with sense and color? Or are they a Virgo rising with Mercury in the 3rd house or something, and they're going to potentially want some more information? So generally, I'll look at the ascendant ruler, and to see what kind, how to modify, adapt, or set my style so that it's in a way that they can be received. Is it Cancer rising? Let's talk about here's the whatever, so whereas you might not want to get so hyper emotional with maybe a Capricorn rising. So
that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, let them set the tone, the pace.
It's true. I mean, if I see Saturn on the ascendant, it's like there's no point, just give them the reading. Michael Luton actually once was asked at a conference, how do you do a reading for Saturn on the ascendant? And they said, you let them do it themselves. You really can't tell them anything. And I've had that experience. Saturn on the ascendant is like, well, that's your reading. Okay. It's like, did any of it reach you? Did anything? Oh no, it was very good. Thank you. It's like, okay, bye. So yeah, you got to take that into account, right? You're right. It's like, what's going on in their chart that they want to hear, so
if they come for reading, which, yeah.
You're
lucky to get them.
Yeah, Amanda, you have something to say about how much astrological detail you give?
Yeah, this is another one of those, it all depends on everything moments, but I think that increasingly most folks who are coming to me are interested in astrology, like they're interested in learning it or using it. And so I almost always start off with a question about what their, exposure to astrology has been and what they're familiar with. And then I will ask them if it's helpful for me to share my screen so that they can see my chart and I can point to the things that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
and then just kind of let them take the lead. And if they don't have a lot of awareness of astrology and they're not interested in using their own chart in their life, then I will use less jargon. Although I tell them that sometimes I will say the words so that when they're listening to the recording later, they can go, you know, Google things if they want more information. But yeah, it just kind of depends on where they're at.
Yeah, that's definitely where they're coming from matters a lot. Not a lot of interest in answering this one. So you got one question to go there, Michaela?
Okay, where was I? Okay, so the most mystical experience in astrology. What is the most mystical experience you've had? I mean, I have one, but it's quite long, so it's hard to know where to go into. But I think I might just say the Mercury retrograde was very heavily influenced in it. So I had a case where my baby son was in hospital for months because he had an esophageal atresia. And I didn't follow the I did follow the astrology up to his birth. Then when I knew there was something wrong, I actually stopped looking because I became a bit afraid to look because Pluto was coming up to oppose my Mars. It had opposed my Mars and it was going to oppose my moon, and my moon rules my 5th house. And there I was in a unit with sick babies and my son having to have an operation. And it's heavy. So anyway, so I didn't look, but then I had my little, what happened was he had his operation to join his esophagus failed. And so that was, that was a shock. And then my dog got cancer. Well, my dog was like a child substitute. And so I had to take her to the vet when my child was in hospital. It was terrible. My father got sick at the same time. Pluto was having a go at my Mars moon midpoint from Sagittarius. And the veterinary surgeon gave me an option of an operation and said there's a 50% chance that she'll survive it and 50% no. Anyway, long story cut short, I followed my intuition. I didn't follow my intuition. I thought I should just take her home. She had a lovely walk because she'd had morphine, she was out of pain, and I didn't follow my intuition. I was in tears as I went back because I knew I'd made a mistake because I left her there. It was dreadful. Long story short, she died on the operation. They had to let her go. She was so riddled with cancer. So I thought, God, this is great. I had an interview with the surgeon for my baby for an operation. They were considering, so it's the next day after that happened, to do a join-up operation, but it had to be a substitute operation because they thought there was a 50% chance. It was the same words, that they wouldn't join up. So you had to have a surgeon who could do an alternate operation. And the alternate operation, the surgeon said, was a stomach lifting operation. And it was drastic. I didn't know at the point, but I said at this point, so I said to him, I'm not going to make a decision now. I saw that Mercury was going retrograde. And so I followed the astrology. Now I thought, this time I'm going to follow the astrology. I'm going to follow my intuition and the astrology. Mercury went retrograde. I said, I'm going to look for a different surgeon, different procedures. I went to the library and wrote to all these surgeons all over the world, 11 of them. I did a procedure. And I thought, well, if it doesn't work, at the end of Mercury going direct, sorry, this is a bit long and I'll finish quickly, then I'll forget it. I'll just go with the stomach lift. But at the end of the Mercury retrograde period, it was just about to go, it went direct. On the morning it went direct. I'd got all these letters back from surgeons saying, really, the stomach lifting is the best procedure, forget the others. The morning it went direct, a letter came through the box and I opened it and it was from a surgeon in Switzerland saying, I have an alternative procedure that I think would be great for your son, and I'm coming to England in 2 months and he'll be exactly the right age and I'm willing to do it. And it was like, that was amazing. So that's my story in a nutshell. Sorry, it was a bit long. Yeah, Mercury retrograde worked.
And the surgeon worked out all, okay.
Yeah. So.
Mine's not quite as dramatic, but in the mid 80s, I started going to ACOA meetings, adult children of alcoholics, because both my parents were alcoholics. And I met a woman there who started the same time I went there. and we were chatting. And of course, I was at that period of time when it's like, say, what's your chart? You know, turns out I met my time twin. She's born the same day, within 15 minutes of me in New York City, where I was born. And we have the same rising sun, everything else is the same. And it kind of blew my mind. I mean, the big difference was, of course, that she was a she and I was a he. And culturally, we had different responses. But what I thought was funny, I'm Taurus rising with a Taurus moon up front in my first house. And everybody tells me I give the greatest hugs ever. And it's funny, I hugged her. We hugged at one point, and I'm like, hey, this is great. This must be what my hugs are like. And I finally understood what people meant, because I met myself hugging me. Real
wonderful.
quickly, we're both in publishing. I was a graphic artist. She was a writer, but she drew on the side. I write on the side. So there were so many similarities. We both had alcoholic parents. It was pretty stunning. I've lost track with her over the years, but that was like 3 years into being an astrologer. I meet my time twin, you
Wow,
know.
that's
So, so I guess Amanda, you're next, right? You wanted to answer this question.
Nope.
Oh, okay then. Michael, did you want to answer the question? Wait, no, you got to go ahead.
Yeah, you also draw on the side. You've shared some of your drawings, so I know you're.
Oh yeah, I draw on stuff, but I'm also a professional graphic artist too, so yeah, it's part of the whole thing.
I'd say first off, every single reading is a mystical experience for me. I'm stepping into that. I call it surfing, energetic surfing. It's like I'm riding the wave of their energetic system and reporting back to them as I'm going through it. But a few years ago, I was getting ready to go see some good friends of mine in Missouri that I've gone and visited for, God, 20 years or so. And I was talking to Erin Sullivan. She said, have you ever looked at the astrocartography for that area? I'm like, I've been going there for 20 years. What do I have to worry? Well, I go and end up in the emergency room with a bit of a medical condition I'm actually still dealing with, like, 10 years later. And it ends up that the place is a Saturn Chiron crossing. And I was having Chiron crossing my Saturn, or Saturn crossing. So it was like a double whammy. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to pay attention to that from now on.
Yeah, sure. But you'd been there before with no problems?
I'd been there before, never, ever a problem. I was like, I thought, that was the weirdest thing for her to even say,
Yeah.
but she's psychic also.
Wow. Yeah.
I should have listened.
Okay, Daniel, what's your mystical experience?
I have kind of a short answer. The first part of the answer is that the older I get, the more numinous my life becomes. So okay, just put that out there. But I kind of want to echo what Michael was saying, that I find that my seventh house Neptune ruler, Pisces seventh house, draws to me people who really reflect me. It's interesting that I find myself in session with people who have gone through or are going through many of the same issues that I have. And so it becomes this open channel, not just to them, but to myself. And it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
I found the same thing happens is that I'll often have clients come in that reflect what transits are going on in my chart at that time. So I'm getting Pluto on my sun lately, and I'm getting a lot of people getting Pluto transits coming in, or Plutonian people that need to be spoken to. So yeah, I do find that, But out of curiosity, just a side note to this, everybody here, do you find you get certain kinds of clients? Like I get a lot of earth and water, not so many air and fire. Do you find that you get clients that suit you in particular?
Anyone? Yeah.
Okay. Ryan, we're going to get to you in a second. I didn't mean to go on a tangent. Go ahead.
Ryan, I think Ryan was asking.
You can answer both questions, Ryan. Okay. A mystical experience. We'll start with that.
Okay, mystical experience. Yes, I believe I met myself in a future life.
Wow.
I know it's kind of trippy, and it kind of messes with linear time. But yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I think I know myself in my next life right now, and it's kind of weird.
Just a quick note I want to mention to you before you get to the next question. I have done future life progressions along with past life regressions, and yes, I have seen one of my future selves. So
Wow.
I understand what you're talking about. But this is a tangent. I don't want to. If it's quick, Michael, go ahead.
I was going to say, Ryan, I think it's your 50 plus self.
No.
Sorry.
Okay. And we have a few people lined up. I don't know what you. I've made a mess of this because I've asked two questions at once. So Ryan, do you have any feeling about? Do you draw on certain kinds of clients that reflect you in general?
Yes, there is a certain year where Pluto and Jupiter are conjoined, and I will draw them to me because my moon is right on their Jupiter-Pluto conjunction.
Okay.
It's awesome.
Okay.
So much fun.
Nia, I'm not sure what question you want to answer, but we have the mystical experience, then we have how kind of clients you get. So go ahead.
Well, I'll go for the second one, because really that's kind of a mystical experience for me, because it's out of any statistics, you know, like, so there's two things I want to share. First of all, I get clients that share patterns that me or my kin share, like patterns that I have personal experience with. And first and foremost, in my case, it's a Mercurial Plutonian connection in the chart. And it's like 95% of my clients have it in their chart. Wow. And I tell them, whenever I say this to my clients, I say, you know, if you would have gathered all together after the session, you would have been sure that I'm saying the same thing to everybody. And the second thing is like, if I fly somewhere to see clients and you see like 30 people over a week or a week and a half or something like that, they all have similar patterns, like similar nodes or similar patterns in their chart, or going through the same cycles. It's like we come in groups, you know, we don't know how herd-like we are. I remember being young and working as a waiter, you know, then we understand how herd-like we are as human beings. But as a therapist, you know, it was an amazing understanding as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Nura, you got two questions you can answer. So mystical and what kind of clients?
Yeah, I really appreciated Nia's sentiment there, where the readings are quite mystical. Like sometimes it's actually just straight freaky, because I'll get people who will have the same ascendant as me, the same nodal axis, and then maybe like another 2 or 3 planets. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna say a bunch of things that maybe I'm needing to hear. And then the interesting part becomes like, how do I make sure I'm not projecting? So it's a whole practice and to kind of make sure I'm separating my energy from their energy. But that happens a lot. And also, I think sometimes I attract people who are working out, I guess, like a lot of relationship things, because I have Pluto in the 7th house, and it's a thing that I'm like, oh no, we're gonna go really deep into stuff. And it's not, I wouldn't say that that's what I intentionally put out or, you know, market about myself, but it is the #1 thing that people come. And I would say #2 is people wanting to like start their own business or branch out from working for somebody else. They want to be self-employed. And so I attract a lot of people who are in that transition space of kind of just needing an affirmation that they're on the right track, that they want what they want for a very specific reason, that is very aligned with something that would make their soul sing. So I often find people kind of are coming for that more than anything, and seeking that astrological validation.
Yeah, but it is strange how they reflect something going on in your chart too at the same time.
Totally.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Michael Pinchera, last we're just about it. We got about 10 minutes left to the show tops. So Michael, your mystical experiences, your kind of client base that you come across.
Well, I'll talk about the client base. It's a wide variety, but they do come in waves. And like Nura was saying, you know, that they come in with certain common issues questions. So I really believe that this has to do with not only as people in general, but even as, in this case, as an astrologer working with someone, but it could be any other kind of counselor, that this karmic stream, that we are connected with it. And that is something that I also do. I didn't think about it when we had the question about what charts we use. I also look at my chart in relationship to the client's chart, because I will see just what the interaction can be, or what it is that they are wanting from me, and what it is that I actually can learn from them, or what it is that I can give to them.
Yeah, that's a very good, actually, that's a very good approach. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Very good idea. Yeah. And what might be triggered between you as well,
Yeah, definitely.
You should be aware of that. Yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
next.
So we're kind of out of questions, but well, we have plenty of questions, but we can go on for hours. And but I have two quick comments. One, somebody had mentioned how times have changed, and I started being an astrologer in the mid '80s, and I always felt like I spent all my time explaining astrology back then. And it just seems to me there's been an exponential wave, an increase of people becoming more mystical. When I was starting out, you couldn't find a Reiki master, and now, at least in New York, you throw a stick and you're going to hit one walking down the street because they're everywhere. So I just find that over the last 30 years or so, there's been this incredible increase in spirituality that is not traditionally mass religion. And so a lot more people come to you going like, well, Mercury is retrograde. It's like, well, how'd you learn that? And it gets out there. Do you have any of you found the similar growth and response of people along the way, that the population as a whole has become more right brain and more intuitive and more spiritual?
Well, I was going to say I think it is because we are at a turning point towards the age of it, in our long journey towards Aquarius. We are at the turning point, and that sort of accelerated in the 60s, but we're in the next wave now. We're really on the crest of the wave going forward. So I think that's really what it's about. Yeah. So
any other experiences out there, anybody?
Yeah, I just want to say, throw in Neptune in Pisces in the last decan here. I mean, that's going to throw everyone into the right brain, I would think.
Unfortunately, also people delusional, like the Trumpers and QAnon and all these crazy groups. Well, it's true though, but that's the two sides of Neptune: the insanity and the spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely.
and I have found. I don't mean to step on you, but I also found that the last couple of years, a lot of people are coming to me that haven't really brought their Neptune out in their chart. And so I find I'm telling a lot of people to meditate more, try doing some painting, do something creative just for yourself to sort of engage that right brain,
Exactly. Good point.
So, and I can see that Neptune, being in Neptune in Pisces that long, it's definitely bringing people. And actually, I think quarantining, I mean, look at how many people learned how to bake bread. How many people are making TikTok videos of them doing dance routines with their buddies in the corner. There's kind of that creativity is pouring out. The quarantine almost said, stop with all this day-to-day crap and just go have some fun while you're waiting for this to be over. So I do see that rich, and it's disease-based. So it's Neptune, both creative and illness.
Yes. Would anyone else like to say something about that? Yes, go ahead, Anthony. Sorry.
Or of course, just wrapping up, does anybody have a question they want to ask for now, or we just bring up there's something they'd like to get some quick feedback on?
Chuck,
do you have some? Chuck, did you raise your hand? No?
Wait a minute. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
She put me on the spot with this one.
Okay.
I wanted to respond about the comment about Trumpers. Because I am one.
Okay.
And with good reason. And when we go to the astrology forums and virtually everyone is anti-Trumpers, it makes me wonder what is wrong with me. I looked at his chart and I offered many interpretations on astrogenians. before I got banned.
Sorry about that. I don't ban it. I wouldn't ban anybody, but go ahead.
Yeah, for free speech. But 99% of the people, the astrologers there, are anti-Trumpers, and I can't figure it out because his chart shows many, many positive things, and the leadership that he did and the things that were accomplished are never reported in the newspaper. For what reason? What's going on?
Mhm.
Anyway, I won't go on. Linda got me to say that. So
No, but I do know. I'll agree. Many astrologers have a very strongly liberal bent and left-wing bent. Part of it because I do believe, astrologers generally have always been outsiders. Particularly, I mean, we were more powerful maybe 500 years ago, but now, I mean, we've been resurging, but we're still outsiders. I don't run out and tell people, oh, I'm an astrologer right away when I meet them. I just wait and see how they feel about it.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of being part of the outcast in something, I think, draws us to the more progressive side. But no, I can understand what you're saying, and there are people that feel that way, and I'm sorry if I was a little flippant in what I said. I'm also looking at people like in the past 20, 30 years, we've had a huge resurgence of old time religion. It doesn't matter whether you're Islamic or the religious right. I'm finding that there's a lot of backlash and fundamentalist beliefs, which I see as that other side of Neptune, wanting to go back into the past as opposed to into the Aquarian age. Not judging anybody. I don't know what's right or what's wrong because I'm not running for president. I wouldn't want the job. So I can't say one way or the other. But yes, there's a lot of confusion there. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say we're all looking at reality from our own angle too, right? So everyone's seeing things from a very valid perspective. It's just because we can even see it with the elements and the planets. There's going to be sometimes dissonance in how we're coming together in that communication. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's true. And polarities, it's the name of the game right now because it polarized views all over the place. But that's a necessary thing. Chaos is necessary before and antithesis is necessary before thesis. It brings it all together later in a balance. So we're tipping the scales from one to the other, and it has become polarized. But we need to cultivate a balanced attitude about that instead of just negating the other's viewpoint.
Yes, absolutely true. And I'm not anti-conservative, but we have in the past 30, 40 years just so polarized ourselves completely. Yeah. And, as we're wrapping up, I just want to mention Mitchell Scott Lewis, some of you may know of him, puts out a newsletter, and he made a very nice point in his most recent newsletter, is he said, after every catastrophic period in history, whether it's the Black Plague or disasters or whatever, we always bounce back. The last Black Plague led to the Renaissance. There's always this kind of quality of that we have as humans. And so I'd like to say, I'm looking forward to post-pandemic world, because I think we've learned some things that don't work anymore, and we've begun to learn things that we can do differently. People are happier working from home. That's going to completely change the landscape, for those that can work from home. So many things going on that I would like to see everybody cooperate and get along on something. I remember the 60s. I'm old enough to know when Republicans and Democrats worked together to bring about things, not to just like a tug of war, pull it, oh, we won, oh no, now we won and we're in charge. So
but that's progress. I mean, we've got to go through this passage, as you say, and all this that's happening, the pandemic and everything else is all part of that.
The only way to the other side sometimes is through the fire. There's nothing else you can do about it.
No.
So Ryan, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to address Chuck real quickly. It's not so much politics or something, but I'm just looking at the movements of Pluto. Pluto in Capricorn has showed us the dark woundedness of all of the structures that we have built in and through whatever we could consider to be toxic control, dominance, toxic masculinity, etc. toxic conservatism. Just rest assured, Chuck, that when Pluto goes into Aquarius, we'll see the dark side of liberalism too. So
That's a good possibility. And don't forget, I mean, I know I'm USA centric, but we are hitting our Pluto return in the next couple of years as a country, and that alone will change things. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we can't be all liberal and we can't be all conservative. Somewhere in there, we've got to find the answer. And I'm just as unhappy with liberals that are just as knee jerk as some other conservatives. I'm not saying all conservatives are, but where it's like, everybody sucks on this side. It's like, that's not true. I'm an astrologer. Everybody's got positive and negative in their charts. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Linda just posted a possibility for one last question. We wrap up. Any thoughts on the U.S. Pluto return, which I didn't even see the question, but I brought it up anyway. Any thoughts on that? Me personally, I think it's a wonderful possibility for a rebirth, but I think not everybody wants to be reborn in America. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Anyone else? Daniel?
Yeah, this has become one of my favorite talks right now. I use a chart for July of 1775 when the Revolutionary War began. And according to that chart, we are already in our Pluto return. This is what it looks like, guys.
Okay.
Exactly.
See, my question has always been, which America? Because were we reborn after the Civil War? Should we use a chart for the ending of the Civil War when we were reunited again? You know, things can get reborn, and I'm not a mundane astrologer, so I'm not getting caught up in this, but the thought occurred to me. We had the Constitution that was drawn up in 1787, I think. We declared it in 1776, but then at 1865, the country came back together again. So
we were the same country both times. The difference was that before the Civil War, we would say the United States are, and after the Civil War, we said the United States is. We were no longer separate states.
That's true. It was a big shift. That was a big shift. Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Okay, Michael Pinchera has something to say, and somebody said birth comes first. I don't know who said that. But Michael, let's wrap up with you. What do you have to say about the Pluto?
Well, I think we're seeing the steps leading up to the Pluto return. You know, a lot of dark stuff is coming to the surface. It has been for a little while, and it's getting stronger and stronger. You know, and it's always darker before the dawn, right? I really feel like we still have a lot of dark stuff to go through before anything. You know, there's a lot of astrologers even, you know, saying, "Oh, we're in the age of Aquarius already." It's really jumping the gun, but I really believe that there is so much healing that needs to come about, and when there's to promote healing, you have to dredge up all the gunk, and that's what's happening. It's going to be happening.
Things are getting more intense, but then it's the last stages of Capricorn, and that's bound to happen, you know, at that last intensity before it hits Aquarius, as Anthony says. Yeah.
And Penelope, it looks like we have one more person who wants to say something.
Hi, and hello to everyone. I was also, with that USA chart, you've got the Chiron return coming up. So the hypersensitivity and the healing links in with that, which I think is quite beautiful as well.
You've got to remember that, haven't you? Good. Yeah, that's well observed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's all I wanted to add to that. Thank you for today as well. It's really good.
Well,
thank you.
I hope you've all had fun. I like this a lot. I like the quick pace of it all. So thank you everybody for joining. And Linda, what's the next date of the next? Linda?
Hang on a second. Give me a minute.
I know it's in April, I think. I'm not, it's April, late April maybe, but I'm not sure. I think we're doing 5 of them a year this time around. Yeah. So, and we'll have more questions for next time. We're trying different formats. Truth is, I like this personally because it just brings a very loose quality. Everybody gets to chat a little bit. We don't have to listen to anybody drone on forever, because you know how us astrologers can drone on when we get into a topic. Let me talk about Pluto for 4 hours. Excuse me, I have some words to say. So I like the lighthearted nature of this show. Okay, Thursday, April 29th, then Thursday, July 29th, October 21st, and December 16th. So we'll see you in about 6 weeks, I guess. Thank you, everybody. This was fun.
Thank you.
Namaste, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, night all.
Thanks.